The skin turned into furniture. The followers who killed on command, Jeffrey Dahmer, Charles Manson, John Wayne Gacy, Ed Gein, Aileen Wuornos. Their names still make people nervous. They still remember the horrific murders, but almost nobody remembers the part that came first. Every one of them was once a small child, standing in a kitchen, looking up at a parent who held all the power in the world. A monster gets built, slowly, inside a house by the very people who were supposed to protect the child living in it. And there are levels to how it is done. Level 1 is the parent who simply does not want you. Charles Manson was born in Cincinnati in 1934 to a teenage mother who was barely more than a child herself. On his birth certificate, there was no first name at all. The clerk wrote down "No name Maddox" because his mother had not bothered to give him one. His father was gone before he arrived. His mother drifted in and out of his life, leaving him with relatives, with strangers, with anyone who would take him for a while. When he was still a boy, she was sent to prison for armed robbery, and the child was passed around the family like an unwanted parcel. Nobody was cruel to him in any spectacular way. That was the point. He was never claimed, never chosen, never the center of anyone's world. He learned early that he belonged to no one, and that no one was coming. By his teens, he was stealing cars and breaking into homes, and the reform schools they sent him to only made it worse. He came out understanding one thing, with total clarity. The world ran on power, and he had none. He spent the rest of his life building a substitute family out of broken young people and turning their devotion into a weapon. In 1969, his followers murdered 7 people across 2 nights, on his command. Manson rarely killed with his own hands. He never needed to. A mother who gave him away had already taught him exactly how to make people belong to him. Level 2 is the parent who is right there in the house and uses every single day to tell you that you are nothing. From the very start, John Wayne Gacy carried a strong man's name and a father who decided almost immediately that his son could never live up to it. John Stanley Gacy was a violent alcoholic, and the boy was soft, heavy, and clumsy. To his father, that was unforgivable. He called him a sissy and a mama's boy, and swore he would never grow into a real man. When words ran out, he reached for a razor strap. When young Gacy landed in the hospital as a child, his father accused him of faking it for attention. The boy spent his entire childhood chasing a single thing, his father's approval. He worked, he tried, he stayed close to the mother who shielded him when she could. The approval never came. And here is the part that quietly breaks you. Gacy never stopped loving him. Even after everything, he said he could not bring himself to hate the man. Between 1972 and 1978, Gacy lured at least 33 young men and boys into his house with the promise of work, then tortured and strangled them. He buried 26 of them in the crawl space beneath the floor where he ate his meals. He had spent a lifetime trying to prove he was a real man to a father who called him worthless. The proof of how completely that lesson took hold was stacked in the dirt under his own home. Level 3 is the parent who locks the door and tells you exactly what you're going to become. Edmund Kemper grew into a giant, nearly 7 feet tall, and his mother treated his size like a threat. Clarnell was an alcoholic who, by every account, including her son's, belittled and humiliated him without rest. When he was around 10, she decided he was a danger to his younger sisters and forced him to sleep alone in a locked basement. He spent his nights down there in the dark, walled off from the family, like something that had to be contained. She held back affection on purpose, telling people she did not want to coddle him. She told him he reminded her of his father, which in that house was an insult. And she told him the sentence he would carry forever, that no woman would ever love him. At 15, he shot both of his grandparents just to see what it felt like. He spent 5 years in a hospital, and doctors declared him safe. Then they released him back to the one place guaranteed to undo him, his mother's house. Between 1972 and 1973, he killed 6 young women, students of the same kind his mother worked beside at the university, the kind she swore would never want him. He buried one victim's head in the garden, turned to face her bedroom window, because she had always wanted people to look up to her. On a spring morning in 1973, he killed his mother while she slept, then picked up the phone and turned himself in. He had finally silenced the voice that built him. Level 4 is the parent who seals the world shut and pours poison into the only mind left in the room. Ed Gein was raised on an isolated Wisconsin farm, 6 miles from the nearest village, by a mother named Augusta, who ruled the home like a church of one. His father was a drunk she despised, so she turned all of her attention onto her sons. Augusta was fanatically religious. She taught Ed that the world outside was rotten, that every woman besides her was a vessel of sin and disease, and that desire itself was filth. She kept the boys from friends, from leaving, from any life that was not built around her. Ed worshipped her and feared her in equal measure. When his father and brother were both dead, it was just Ed and his mother alone on that quiet farm. And when she died in 1945, the single fixed point in his entire universe vanished. He sealed off her rooms and kept them as a shrine. Then, alone in the rotting house, he began to dig. He robbed the graves of recently buried women who reminded him of her, and used their skin and bones to make things he could wear and hold. When police searched the property in 1957, they found furniture and clothing made from human remains. He confessed to killing 2 women. He was ruled insane and lived out his days in a state hospital, where staff described him as calm and content. A mother had spent his whole life teaching her son that the world was nothing but a graveyard. In the end, he simply moved in. Level 5 is the parent who hands you to someone worse and then walks away. Aileen Wuornos never stood a chance from her first breath. Her father was a convicted child molester she never met, a man who took his own life in prison. Her mother abandoned her and her brother before Aileen turned 5. The children were taken in by their grandparents, and that is where the deepest damage was done. By her own account and her family's, her grandfather was a violent alcoholic who beat her with a leather strap on her bare skin and told her she was worthless and did not deserve to live. There were claims of sexual abuse in that house that no adult ever stopped. As a young teenager, she became pregnant after a rape, was sent away to give the baby up, and was then thrown out of the only home she had. By 15, she was sleeping in cars and in the woods, selling her body to strangers just to survive. She grew up certain that every hand reaching toward her was a threat, because for years it had been. Between 1989 and 1990, she shot 6 men along the highways of Florida and took their money and their cars. She insisted some of them had attacked her first. She was convicted and executed by the state in 2002. A mother's one job is to stand between her child and the worst of the world. Aileen's mother opened the door and let the worst of the world walk straight in. Level 6 is the parent who gives the child away to be broken, and the breaking holds for life. Albert Fish was 5 years old in 1875 when his father died, and his mother, unable to feed him, placed him in a Washington orphanage. She believed she was buying time until she could bring him home. What she handed him to was a place that ran on the whip. The staff beat the children savagely and forced them to watch one another suffer. It was meant to be discipline. Inside one small boy, something went catastrophically wrong instead. The pain stopped feeling like punishment and started feeling like pleasure. By the time his mother came back for him years later, the wiring was already set. For the rest of his long life, Fish chased that feeling. He drove sewing needles into his own body, dozens of them, and an examination decades later found them still buried in his pelvis. He hurt himself in ways almost too disturbing to put into words, but his own pain was never enough. In the 1920s, as a soft-spoken, gray-haired old man who looked like everyone's harmless grandfather, Fish began preying on children. He was convicted of luring a 10-year-old girl away from her family and killing her, then mailing her mother a letter describing what he had done. The cruelty in that letter broke the people who read it. Psychiatrists said they had never recorded so many disorders in a single human being. He was executed in 1936. A mother left her son somewhere she thought was safe. The place she chose taught him that suffering was love, and he spent 50 years passing that lesson on to children who never made it home. Level 7 is the worst a parent can do. It is to take the child apart while he is still alive to feel every piece come loose. Henry Lee Lucas was born in 1936 into a dirt floor cabin in the hills of Virginia to a mother named Vila. His father had lost both legs in an accident and drank himself into a corner of the room. Vila made her money selling herself, and she forced her small son to sit and watch while she did it. That was not enough for her. When Henry started school, she dressed him as a girl, curled his hair into ringlets, and sent him out barefoot to be laughed at. She kept him that way for years. He later said that after the dresses, he became what he called the dog of the family. She beat him without end. Once, she struck him across the head with a plank so hard, he lay unconscious for 3 days. When his eye was injured, she ignored it, until the infection meant it had to be removed and replaced with glass. A man living in the house taught the boy to torture animals. There was no part of Henry his mother left whole. She destroyed his name, his body, and his sense of being human, piece by piece, long before he was big enough to fight back. In 1960, they argued, and he stabbed her, and she died there on the floor. He went on to kill, though the true number will never be known, because he later confessed to hundreds of crimes he could not possibly have committed. The courts confirmed 11. Long before Henry Lee Lucas ever took a life, his mother had already killed the boy he was meant to grow into. Everything that came after was just the body she left behind, still walking. 7 children, 7 houses, 7 different ways a parent can reach into a life and bend it until it snaps. Not one of them was born wanting to kill. Every one of them was taught at home by the people who were supposed to love them first.